Well, I'm in the United Kingdom right now. I'm in staying with my sister in a town called Clacton on the coast in England. And this, this here is without doubt one of the best cats on the face of the planet. This is Jaxx Cat. And I tell you, as cats go, this is right up there, right? Shackleton, right? Sorry, mate. Jaxx Cat, right? So I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to take said cat with me back to Australia. So I'm just going to have to love it up as much as I can while I'm here. But I'm telling you, as cats go, that is a master. Maybe I'll take some genes back. I want to just talk briefly about my experience over the last couple of weeks participating in the Extinction Rebellion actions in London. I came over here to England. I flew here on a plane powered by kerosene that left carbon and contrails in the atmosphere. I acknowledge that. I haven't done a carbon flight. I think it's about 3 tons of carbon. I mean, somebody can do this. Somebody maybe want to do the sums for me, but you know, it was a not an insignificant amount of carbon has been left in the atmosphere. My pro rata share of the flight. Okay, I want to acknowledge that. I set up a thing called Rebel Offset, which is a way that people could offset their flights. I'm going to write that here. Offset.com, which is a way that people could offset their air travel by helping to pay the fines of Extinction Rebellion activists. So I've offset, I've paid into that fund that I've created the air trip on the way over, and I will pay into that fund the offset for the air trip on the way back. I haven't paid for the return flight yet. I haven't taken the return flight. Anyway, I came here to England to, on one hand, to participate in the Extinction Rebellion, London, but also to spend some time with my family who who live in the southeast of England, and the cat, of course, Jack, yeah, best cat in the known universe. So just a couple of thoughts on the Extinction Rebellion as I've participated in it. And these thoughts are sort of framed in a way to sort of counterbalance my experience of Extinction Rebellion in Brisbane. So I first learned of Extinction Rebellion in about October last year. I think October was when they first occupied the bridges in London, I think for about 4 or 5 days. That's when the movement came onto the world stage, if you like, or in the world media. And then in April of this year, they did about 9 days of actions in London. And those actions were, my experience of those actions were predominantly through live streams to Facebook by a young fellow whose name is Elliot Laughlin. Elliot has been very active in live streaming the actions in over the last few weeks, and indeed he was so central to the live streaming of these actions that he live streamed the actions on the tube station a few days ago, which is what the action which has actually really put Extinction Rebellion into the global focus, not necessarily in the best of lights, but I'll come to that. So I wanted to speak for a few minutes, not for too long, but just to sort of sum up a few of my insights into Extinction Rebellion in London, and particularly vis-a-vis how I see it being deployed in Brisbane, particularly in Brisbane, but in Australia overall. So there's a lot of people here. Great Britain is the natural place for Extinction Rebellion to be successful in the first instance. And when I say that, what I mean is, like, the idea of Extinction Rebellion is that they bring people power onto the streets in a highly coordinated and strategic approach to pressure government to commit and then follow up on taking expedient action on climate and biodiversity crisis through the three demands, the first of which is to tell the truth, the second of which is a rapid decarbonisation of the economy, and the third demand is to deploy an augmentation of the democratic system called a citizens' assembly, which basically allows the general public to have a direct say in decision making over the most important issues associated with dealing with the impacts of climate change that are coming down the pipeline, and also the responses to climate change, such as the way that, you know, that government policy is directed and funding is directed to reducing the impacts and actually mitigation and fixing the, you know, dealing with the consequences. Mitigation, adaptation, that's what I'm thinking of. The cat is distracting me. So what's very, very interesting about London and England is how gentlemanly people, gentle personally people are, how genteel people are when when being arrested. Yeah, it's very much a sense of there is a script, there is a game plan, there is a game being played, and when you see these people being arrested in England, it's everyone's playing by the rules. The rebels are playing by the rules. They lock on, they glue on, they sit on the streets, they do whatever is necessary, you know, to obstruct, and then they get arrested, and the police come along and they say, "Oh, hi, how you going? My name is PC Plod, and I'm from here." It's very polite. It is so polite. I have seen the most extraordinary instances of politeness in the last few weeks. When I went out to the action at the city airport. So there's an airport that's like really central in London called City Airport. It does a lot of short and medium haul flights to Europe and around UK. And there was probably about, I don't know, 50 or 100 people. There's probably about 50 people arrested, but there was a couple of hundred rebels out there occupying the forecourt and so forth. That was the action where the partially sighted Paralympian somehow managed to climb on top of a jet and glue himself to the jet, delayed the flight for hours. Incredible scenes. But there was people being arrested there. There was this one guy that got arrested, and the police moved him over to like this little sort of like area away from the road. And as they lifted him up or had him stand up, he bumped his head on this like sign. And the policeman was like incredibly apologetic. "Oh, I'm so sorry." He says, "Are you okay?" "Oh yeah, I'm fine, mate." It's like, it's just polite over here. The relationship between the people and the police over here, the general public who are actually the participants in the actions, and the police, it's very polite. It's very decorous. And what that sort of means is that the battle that has been waged, if you like, is not being waged on the street per se. There's not aggression between the police and the public. The battle is being raised further up in the hierarchy. I think that makes sense. The other thing is that Great Britain has got, I think, around 86 million people. It's a small country. You can drive from one side to the other in about 6 hours. For example, I went from London to Cambridge. It took an hour on a train. I went from London to Clacton, where I am now. It's an hour and a half. You know, within 2 hours of travel on public transport, there's probably a catchment of 40 million people. So to bring mass amounts of people, although there's obviously only a tiny proportion of people that would be active in something like Extinction Rebellion, but you've got a catchment of 40 million people within a few hours of the city. So hypothetically, if people were didn't have anything planned for an afternoon, they could get a call in the morning to show up for an action in the centre of London. You've got potentially millions and millions of people that could show up. And so given that London is also so central to UK, it's not, London is more central to the United Kingdom than Canberra is to Australia, for example. And so what I'm saying by this is that in terms of bringing people into the capital to gridlock a capital in order to coerce a government into expedient action on climate change, then England is actually a really good place to do it because you've got such a huge catchment of people that come in. You need only a minuscule proportion of the people in that 30 million person catchment to have a bee in their bonnet about climate change to actually bring thousands and thousands of people in. And this is why I call the United Kingdom the capital of the rebellion. Sorry about that. Sorry to disturb you. So there's that. That's an important distinction, right? And I think, and also Great Britain is where the Industrial Revolution started, okay? And so let's make this the country where the Industrial Revolution ends, where the transition to the new Industrial Revolution, or I don't know what you want to call it, but the eco-sustainable version of the Industrial Revolution, it ought to be, it could begin. There's no reason why it couldn't begin here. It's got all of the brains, it's got all the universities, it's got all of, it's wealthy, you know, from all of the raping and pillaging of the colonies, you know. It's got this incredible ethnic diversity, in part because of the raping and pillaging of the colonies. And so for me, Great Britain is where this thing, this idea, I see the Extinction Rebellion as being, I was talking to my friend the other day who's deeply involved in this, and she said, you know, oh, Extinction Rebellion's here and clean energy is there, and, you know, like biofuels, you know, sustainable algae biofuels. These are all different ideas out there and in the universe about a better future. And I said, yes, but you got to understand, Extinction Rebellion is the battering ram. Extinction Rebellion is the point of the spear. The point of the spear needs to go in before the rest of the spear can penetrate through. That's what Extinction Rebellion is. Extinction Rebellion is the battering ram that bashes down the door that allows all of this amazing eco-sustainable stuff to come in afterwards. You can't, it's all well and good having algae biofuels and renewable energy technologies that are cheaper than coal and all of this amazing stuff that's ready to go. There's no point in having all of that stuff if it can't get through the door, right? And that's what Extinction Rebellion is. It's the battering ram that breaks down the door and allows all of those amazing things to happen. I've personally been involved in this conversation for 20 years. I've been an advocate and a promoter of clean technologies and renewable energy and energy efficiency and, you know, algae biofuels. I keep talking about algae biofuels, so few people understand what that's about. It's the alternative to liquid fuels made from petroleum. And all the time, you know, and I thought like 20 years ago that when fossil fuels became cheaper, that when renewable energy became cheaper than fossil fuels, then economics would just allow the renewable energies to take over. What I didn't understand back then was politics, that our nations are governed by not the government, but by an economic elite who spend a lot of money to ensure that government policy looks after their interests. And broadly speaking, the economic elite have got no interest whatsoever in the well-being of the biosphere or the body of the people that live on this planet. And so government policy always tends to shore up the role of fossil fuels in the economy. And so when renewable energy becomes, the cost of renewable energy comes down to such an extent that it's actually cheaper now to put in renewables in Australia than it is to maintain existing fossil fuel plants, one would logically think that the market would shift in that direction. But because policy is not directed by governments looking after the interests of the public, it's directed by government looking after the interests of the elite, particularly the economic elite, who are largely buoyed by fossil fuels. That's why it's held back. Like Australia would be well underway to a transition to clean energy if it wasn't for the government retarding that process, that progress. And so Extinction Rebellion is like a battering ram that bats that ship side. That's how I see it. And that's why I support it. Extinction Rebellion is the movement that breaks down the barriers to allow all of the good stuff to happen. And United Kingdom, now here's the thing as well, is that we're in a global economic system. It's globalized. Can't get away from that. And that's, on one hand, that's bad, because if something bad happens globally, it means that Australia can't bounce off and do its own thing because it's constrained by all these global rules, right? And there's a global international elite. So the wealthy people in Australia, the very wealthy people in Australia, flit around with the very wealthy people in the United Kingdom, and flit around with the very wealthy people in Brazil, and they flit around with the very wealthy people in America. And so there's this global international elite who have got the system locked up in their interests, but not locked up in the interests of the people, the public, or the planet. And so it's a suicidal madness. And so what I see in the United Kingdom is, what I see overall is that if one country can break through that Gordian knot of psychopathic moneyed elites, if one country can break through that, then it will encourage all the other countries that have got an Extinction Rebellion movement for them to put in renewed effort, because they see that this movement can succeed. At the moment, this movement hasn't succeeded. I mean, like, this movement's only 18 months old, right? This movement was founded, in April 2018. Extinction Rebellion was founded or invented in April 2018. I mean, maybe it actually really began when there was a declaration of rebellion against the government, which was in October last year. I mean, it's about a year old. It's about 18 months old. So, but the point is that it's not a protest movement that seeks to go on and on and on and on, protesting something that it can't change. It's got 3 demands, and those 3 demands are going to be hammered down the neck of a national government. And the first national government to go, yep, we get it. We've got no choice here. We've got to take this. We've got to do this thing. We've got to commit to these 3 demands. The first government that does that opens the door for the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and then the dominoes fall. All right. So that's my logic. That's why, and then that's part. I mean, apart from coming to see my family in the UK, that's why I came to London for the Extinction Rebellion action in October, because I wanted to see the capital of the rebellion. This nation is the most likely nation to go first, right? Now, maybe Australia will go first, but Australia is spread out. You've got 23 million people who are spread out across, I mean, most of those are spread out across like 6 cities, separated by thousands of kilometers. You know, the capital itself is way out in what's it called? You know, it's hard to bring enough people in. I mean, maybe Australia will go first. It'll overcome those geographical challenges. But this country, Now, here's another really interesting, this is actually a very interesting point. So in Australia, I think that climate change is very, in Australia, climate change is very, it's apparent. Like we've lost half of the corals on the Great Barrier Reef. All right, last year in Australia, let me just list off the litanies of disasters. And these are extreme weather disasters, and you could argue whether they're attributed to climate change or not. That's fine, but basically, that climate change, like the planet's hotter, so everything is affected by climate change. But you know, we had the massive flooding in Townsville. We lost 500,000 cattle and flooding in North Queensland, and massive infrastructure damage to the communities up there. The Murray-Darling River went belly up, and we lost 1 million fish, including these massive cod that have been around for 100 years. There's heat waves across all the capital cities. There was bushfires running pretty much throughout the whole season. You know, I mean, it was a clusterfuck. And this coming season, this coming summer in Australia, it's going to be the same again. It's just going to be an extra 38 gigatons of CO2 in the atmosphere. All right, it's just going to be hotter. It's going to be worse, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. In Australia, you feel climate change. You can smell it because of the stench of bushfires burning. In England, where we've got the millions and millions of people, at a short distance from the capital, they don't feel it. They're not feeling it. The scientists recognize it. The scientists identify an uptick in wildfires in places where they haven't had wildfires before. But I've talked to so many people over here who see climate change as something that is so abstract, so abstract. I was at a restaurant tonight and I was talking to people about climate change, and they just said, nah, I've heard about it. I haven't seen the climate change. Now, I mean, there's been heat waves here that were unprecedented. There has been no doubt that there's been evidence of itself through extreme weather events in the United Kingdom. It definitely has, but not to the point that people are smelling it and getting that visceral ear for it. I think that's something that you see in Australia, but you just don't see over here. So in Australia, you've got this disparate population far away from the capital. It's a lot of effort. If there's going to be say 10,000 people commit to taking Canberra in a direct non-violent action over a fortnight, for example, that's a big effort. Not so much in the UK because it's a couple of hours train ride to anywhere, right? But in Australia, people really sense it. Climate change. I mean, there's towns in Australia that have got to bring water in by trucks. You don't have that in the United Kingdom, right? It's a relatively wealthy, prosperous nation, so food production, most of the food's probably bought in. So if there's a food production problem, it would probably be still a bit more expensive to bring it in, as opposed to, wow, we've just lost agricultural regions like we are in Australia. So I don't know, maybe Australia will go first. Okay, so now I'm shifting my position here from this conversation. So my original position was that the United Kingdom would go first. And what I mean by go first, I mean cave into the pressure of the Extinction Rebellion, that the government would commit and implement actions that shift rapidly, start telling the truth about climate change, which would be nice, and secondly, commit to a rapid decarbonisation of the economy, and thirdly, put in place some sort of mechanism that is guided by broad public support as opposed to a political elite decision makers and and ultimately the economic elite who pressure them through lobby groups. Right. So I totally understand the logic behind those three demands, and certainly that needs to be done in a manner that is fair and equitable and brings the public along and recognizes the injustices of colonialization and doesn't try to, that actually repairs that damage as much as possible. I mean, we're going into hell whether we fix this problem or not. We're going into food shortages and extreme weather events and climate chaos, whether we act on this thing or not, right? If we act on this thing, then it would be less pain, right? But we're still going into pain. We've got the lag. We've got this 30-year lag between when you push the carbon in the atmosphere and you feel the impacts of the heating. Okay, so what that means in a really simple terms is that the climatic impacts that we're seeing on the planet right now are a result of all of the carbon emissions that we've put up into the atmosphere up until 20 or 30 years ago, right? And it sort of suggests that if we were to hypothetically that's the cat. That's my oh well. Okay, well the cat will come back. The cat. All right. So what I'm saying is that, like the lag, the idea of the lag says that it doesn't matter what we do. We can't turn this thing off. You can't turn it off, right? It's like the freight train. It's got this momentum built up behind it. If we continue to drive along, then the freight train continues to travel at its full speed. If you slam the brakes on today, the freight train's got so much momentum that it's going to take a long, long, long time before the thing stops. And so we're getting there. Anyway, that's the lag. So the point is that somewhere has to go first. Is it going to be Great Britain? Somewhere has to go first. Somewhere, some nation is going to take the challenge of becoming a responsible nation in climate change and biodiversity, and it's going to do it first. Now, Costa Rica has done amazing stuff, all right, and a few other small nations have done some amazing stuff in going first in their own right, but we need a major industrial country to do it in order for that to then be to create the lead, right? Everyone's afraid of being first at things, right? Because of the cost of being first. You know, you don't want to be first and doing something different because you break away from the pack and maybe it doesn't work and then you suffer from it. But the nation that goes first and commits to it and does it properly, all right, is going to have an extraordinary opportunity to lead in the world that's coming forward, the world that comes forward as somebody brings it into existence. You know, like I'm saying, I've been involved in this clean tech stuff. One of my penchants over the years has been, I've got this website, CO2. I'm going to see if I can find the link to it, just so you can see what I'm talking about. So I built this website 20 years ago, CO2, which is the name of my consulting brand. In fact, that's what I want to do. Just stand by with me so I can hear. Okay, I'm going to go to, okay, so take a look at this website here, all right? So I started building this thing 20 years ago. Now that link that I've just put into the post there is to basically a whole bunch of ocean energy technologies. These are technologies where machines that go into the ocean that generate electricity from the waves, all right? And there's been some, just to mention the name of a couple of them. There was a Scottish device called the Oyster. It's called the Oyster because it kind of looks like an oyster. It kind of sits on the seafloor, and as the waves go by, it's got this shell that opens up like this, like an oyster shell opening up. And it's big, big, big machine. There's a photograph of it where you can see the little tiny people next to this big machine. And they deployed it. I don't know what happened to the Oyster. Last I heard, the Oyster, I mean, it's complicated engineering. It's a lot of money, like millions and millions of dollars involved in developing these new technologies, and then you got to put them in the ocean, and then the big heavy waves, and you got to have government support, and you've got to have private investment, and you've got to. Anyway, I don't know what happened to the Oyster, but I think it might have collapsed. I mean, it might have just simply had a quarter where it couldn't pay its bills, and that years and years of effort just disappeared. There was another technology called Palamas. Palamas, I think it's a Portuguese or Spanish word for sea snake. And basically it was these long tubes that sat on the surface, and they kind of on the sea surface, and when there were big waves, the tubes would interact like this. And in this junction point between the two tubes, there was all this hydraulics that would pump hydraulic fluid back to the shore or somewhere, which would then drive a turbine to make electricity. My point is that there's hundreds and hundreds of renewable energy technologies out there that have been developed and have been floundering for decades, floundering for decades, trying to get into the marketplace, but they can't get into the marketplace because the marketplace is dictated by the economic elite, who are fucking psychopaths, who don't care about the future, and they don't care about the planet, they don't care about life. And the Extinction Rebellion is an opportunity to smash through the gate that is holding back all of these clean technologies, that some of which you can see on that page that I've just linked, and also the links to the other clean technologies that are at the top of the page. And so, and that's why I support the Extinction Rebellion, because it's not just, it's because of what the Extinction Rebellion can potentially bring into existence. Not because Extinction Rebellion isn't a network of clean technology companies. It's not that. The Extinction Rebellion is a network of people who see that if they push and push and push, then governments can start to be a part of the solution for climate and biodiversity crisis. And the way that the governments, or one way that the governments could be a solution for climate and biodiversity crisis, is to open the door for all of these technologies and ideas and principles and practices and that are basically held back right now, stuck. And that's what's really exciting for me, because I've spent so much time snooping around and learning about and even participating in and helping to co-develop and create and build an entrepreneur, all of these clean tech and green tech ideas. I've been involved in that stuff for 20 years, and I've been frustrated. I've been frustrated all that time because there was no traction for them. And the Extinction Rebellion potentially creates the opportunity to actually, I'm going to show you. The freaking cat is peeing in the pot plant. Oh, sorry about that. The cat's peeing in the pot plant. I mean, part of this narrative is to, like the cat thing. People love cats. Okay, sorry about that. You didn't hear that from me. Cut that out. We'll edit that bit out from the final version. Maybe now that the cat's peed in the pot plant, it'll actually come and sit with me. Okay, so but this is the point: the Extinction Rebellion. So I want to talk about the action on the tube station. All right. So 2 days ago, 2 days ago, some Extinction Rebellion activists in London proposed an idea to block the tube. The tube is the name of this underground railway system in London. It's hugely popular. I mean, millions and millions of people travel. It's an integral piece of public transport infrastructure in this capital city of. The cat's back. Okay? Okay, so one of the ideas. Okay, you don't need to look at that. Can you turn around, please? We're on camera now. Okay. This is where does this cat learn, you know, film technique? Okay, so the tube is hugely important. It's underground. I mean, if anybody's been to London that's been on the tube, you'll know that the tube is a pretty amazing thing. And it carries a lot of people. Anyway, some guys suggested that if, as part of this Extinction Rebellion action in London, that they might interrupt the actions of the tube. And anyway, so it went to like various folks in the Extinction Rebellion decision-making process, and overwhelmingly, the broad community of Extinction Rebellion activists rejected the idea of interrupting the tube. Now, there's a couple of reasons why they do that. Firstly, is there's an idea that you want to bring the public on side in this debate, in this campaign. Okay, it's either me or the cat. So if there's a public vote, we'll go one way or the other. We're trying to get both at the moment. All right, so there was this. So overwhelmingly, the Extinction Rebellion community rejected the idea of blocking the tube. And for good reason, right? Because you're trying to keep the public on side the rebellion. And the tube is so important to so many people who have to get to work. And a lot of people, one of the guys that was interviewed after that tube action said that he was a 0-hour worker. I didn't know what that was. I asked my sister. And she said that 0-hour workers are people who don't have fixed contracts in their employment, which means that basically they get called into work when the work's there, and which means that, but only when the work's there. It's not like you get like 30 hours a week guaranteed, right? You get 0 hours guaranteed, and if there's work there, we'll call for you. And so some of the people that are interrupted on getting to work were people on these 0-hour contracts, which means that the only money that they've got coming in is money that they get when they get a phone call. And if they can't get there, they don't get paid, right? Which is distinct from people that might be on PAYG contracts or something, which means that if they get in late because they're distracted by a rebel, they still get paid. And so that action that actually interrupted the train line, I don't know how long the train was interrupted for, but I was at a tube station a few weeks ago at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was so packed. It was so packed that the tube turned up, and the tube was literally packed with human beings. They were pressed against the windows. And when the door opened, right, 2 people got out, and there was a crowd of about 30 people trying to get in. I actually had to wait until the next tube came along, but I was still at the back of the queue. The next tube came along, I was still at the back of the queue. I actually walked away thinking I'd just abandon this, go and get a coffee and come back an hour later, turned around, came back, and finally managed to get onto this tube, and I'm squished in like this, okay? And so the point is that when you interrupt the tube, you're interrupting a fucking ton of people. And in this instance, you're interrupting a ton of people who are really need to get to work because of financial reasons, that they don't get a day off. You can't just like ring up and say, oh, the tube's blocked, to get the day off, and you still get paid. And so the tube action, the XR tube action the other day annoyed the piss out of a lot of people. And one of the guys, or the guy that was most featured in the video or TV news, was wearing a suit on top of a train in a tube station in a working class area. And so there was this kind of toff that was stopping them for noble climate reasons. And he got dragged down off the station and he got stomped, right? He didn't get killed. It wasn't like a stomping that you'd see in Africa or you know, South America. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those stomping movies, but videos, but he got beaten up, right? He got beaten up. Now, so I want to say a couple of things about that. Firstly, it was not pretty to watch. And if you were to have an Extinction Rebellion logo here and a picture of one of their activists getting stomped by an angry mob at a tube station, that is not good imagery association. That is not a good association for the Extinction Rebellion in any way, right? So from that perspective, you want to say that action was inappropriate and it failed. Okay. With that said, I want to say this. All right. Okay. I'll just say one more thing about on that side is that the action was largely disavowed by the broad movement. Right. So that was not an action that was representative of the Extinction Rebellion movement, and it was not an action that could be regarded from an optics perspective as a good thing. Now, with that said, I want to say this. Extinction Rebellion's theory of change does not rely on the broad scale enrollment of the public in the movement. The theory of change of Extinction Rebellion is that a small, highly committed group of people, a small proportion of the public who are highly committed, will pull this thing off. Extinction Rebellion was not designed in the sort of normal model of NGOs to have mass participation of people involved. Okay, mass as in like large percentage of the population. So Extinction Rebellion does not succeed because millions and millions and millions and millions of people pay a monthly fee in subscriptions to be a part of the group. Extinction Rebellion succeeds when a small minority, and this is like the 3.5% to use a number, call it 5% of the population, is agitated enough to take direct action, non-violent mass participation, civil disobedience, disruptive civil disobedience. A small proportion of the public takes action for Extinction Rebellion. That's what makes it work, as per the Extinction Rebellion theory of change. And so the fact that thousands of people were pissed off because the XR activists jumped onto that train is kind of a little bit immaterial in a way. Okay, like I'm saying, it's bad optics. It's not good to associate people being stomped on a train station with the Extinction Rebellion logo. That's bad optics. But in the bigger picture, with respect to the theory of change, what that action did was it put Extinction Rebellion in news broadcasts across the entire planet instantly. Okay? Instantly. Right? Extinction Rebellion had been broadly ignored. The actions over the last 2 weeks, and I've participated in them and I've live streamed them. I've watched hundreds of people being arrested and carted away and carried away. I've watched the police come in with the specialist tools to drill through and extract people from the lock-on devices. I've seen them come in with their big syringes full of solutions to unglue people off the road. There's been a lot of actions. I've seen actions taking place outside the British Treasury. These are not insignificant locations in Great Britain, right? I've seen, there was hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people outside on the mall. This is down from Trafalgar Square, down from the mall, right outside the gates of Downing Street. Downing Street being the street where the Prime Minister lives. You've got the big sign up there saying Downing Street, and this big black wrought iron gate on the other side of which is policed with submachine guns, and then thousands of activists in the street. And I watched them. They pitched their tents there, and I watched the police march down in this big line of fluoro, push all the rebels back, and then basically stream in and take all the tents away, and then arrest everybody that was sitting down, and then once they'd taken the tents and the people that were sitting down away, they got to work on the people that were locked on and glued on. In the space of hours, they cleared the whole place. Nearly 2,000 people have been arrested for this motion, for this action over the last 2 weeks, and yet it got practically no mainstream media coverage. Practically no mainstream media coverage at all, right? And then a couple of kids jump on top of a train, a tube, annoy the piss out of a bunch of people that really needed to get to work and were flogged for it, literally dragged onto the concrete, including my friend Elliot, who was live streaming it. It wasn't part of planning or executing the action, it was simply filming it as a citizen journalist. The three people got dragged onto the ground and stomped with boots and punched in the face and the head. All right. So, but that's what got the mainstream media. That is what told the world that there was this thing called Extinction Rebellion. And in the international news broadcasts that I've seen that reported on the action, apart from showing the video of the people being dragged and beaten, they also showed statements of people talking about why they were there in the first place. We are in a climate and ecological emergency. We need to do something about it. We need to pressure governments. Extinction Rebellion, hugely successful. Okay, so from the Extinction Rebellion theory of change, we're only trying to get a small percentage of the public who are committed, as opposed to bringing on board the broader public. The broader public probably are reinforced in their view that Extinction Rebellion is a bunch of fucking wankers, right? Maybe so, doesn't matter. The question is whether we've helped to bolster the small minority to be more committed. And I suspect that that is probably what has happened overall. Right? Now, I'm not advocating that more people go and annoy the piss out of East Londoners by jumping on tubes. I'm not advocating that whatsoever. What I'm trying to say is that I think that from a strategic games perspective, I think that that action, for large part, even people in XR seem to be saying that action wasn't clever. But I suspect that if you think it through in terms of the theory of change and how this thing could succeed, I think you'll find that that action was probably maybe have been an inflection point in the movement. In an inflection point, this movement is prides itself on being anti-fragile, or maybe not anti-fragile, but it prides itself on learning, being a learning organization. And I think that that action on the tube was a massive opportunity for learning for Extinction Rebellion. It certainly created a lot of people talking about Extinction Rebellion. That in itself can't be a bad thing. I'm going to end this this stream now. Thank you for listening to me, and we'll do more soon. To stop the rebellion, to stop the extinction, join the rebellion. To stop the rebellion, I don't know. I don't think you can do that. Why would you want to?